everyone, this is the chapter 12 ecosystem. We are covering the ecology unit. So, starting this chapter, an ecosystem can be visualized as a functional unit of nature where the living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment, like the abiotic factors. Ecosystem varies greatly in size and from a small pond to a large forest or a sea. Many ecologists regard the entire biosphere as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on the earth. Since this system is too much big and complex to be studied at the one time, it is convenient to divide it into two basic categories, namely terrestrial and the aquatic. Forest, grassland, and desert are some of the terrestrial ecosystems. Pond, lake, wetland, river, and estuary are some of the examples of aquatic ecosystems. Crop fields and aquarium may also be considered as man-made ecosystems. We will first look at the structure of the ecosystem in order to appreciate the input productivity, transfer of energy, food chain or web or nutrient cycling, and the output degradation and energy loss. We will also look at the relationships, cycles, chains, webs that are created as a result of these energy flows within the system and their interrelationships. So, ecosystem structure and function. In earlier classes, you have looked at the various components of the environment, the abiotic and the biotic. You studied how the individual biotic and abiotic factors affected each other and their surrounding. Let us look at these components in a more integrated manner and see how the flow of energy takes place within these components of the ecosystem. Interaction of the biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic for each of the type of the ecosystem. Identification and enumeration of the plant and animal species of an ecosystem derives its species composition. Vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. Vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. For example, trees occupy top vertical strata or the layer of the forest, shrubs the second, and the herbs and grasses occupy the bottom layers. The components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects. So these are productivity, decomposition, energy flow, nutrient cycling. So we may be asked, like, components of the ecosystem to be function as a unit. It will be productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. The stratification does not count in it. You may be getting the option of stratification. And to understand the ethos of an aquatic ecosystem, let us take an example of pond. This is fairly a self-sustainable unit and rather simple example that explain even the complex interactions that exist in an aquatic ecosystem. A pond is a shallow water body in which all the above mentioned four basic components of the ecosystem are well exhibited. The abiotic component is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and the organic substances and the rich soil deposit at the bottom of the pond. The solar input, the cycle of the temperature, day length, and other climatic conditions regulate the rate of function of the entire pond. The autotrophic components include the phytoplankton, some algae, and the floating submerged and the marginal plants found at the edges. The consumers are represented by zooplankton, the free-swimming and the bottom-dwelling forms. The decomposers are the fungi, bacteria, and flagellate, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. Decomposers are fungi, bacteria, and flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of any ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole, such that conversion of inorganic into organic material with the help of the radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs, consumption of the autotrophs by the heterotrophs, decomposition and mineralization of the dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. These events are repeated over and over again. There is unidirectional movement of the energy towards the higher trophic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. Let's talk about different components of ecosystem. First one is productivity. So a constant input of solar energy is a basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain, because solar energy is required for the production of food by the producers. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. So what is the primary productivity? Uh, Talking about primary productivity, gross primary and the net primary productivity, secondary productivity, these questions are asked many times. So remember the definition. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced by per unit area over the time period by plants during photosynthesis. It is expressed in terms of weight, gram per meter square, or energy, kilocalorie per meter square. The rate of biomass production is called productivity. It is expressed in terms of gram per meter square year inverse or kilocalorie per meter square year inverse. To compare the productivity of different ecosystems, it can be divided into gross primary productivity and the net primary productivity. So gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. A considerable amount of GPP is utilized by the plants in respiration. Gross primary productivity minus respiration losses is the net primary productivity. GPP minus R is equal to NPP. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs, herbivores, and the decomposers. Secondary productivity is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by the consumers. So primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting a particular area. It also depends on the variety of environmental factors, availability of nutrients, and the photosynthetic capacity of the plants. Therefore, it varies in different types of ecosystem. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons, dry weight of the organic matter. Of this, despite occupying about 70% of the surface, the productivity of the oceans are only 55 billion tons. Rest, of course, is of land. So basically, what is the productivity of the land? 170 minus 55, and it will be in billion tons. So it will be 160. Oh, sorry. 115 billion tons. This is the primary productivity of the land, and despite it is covering the smaller surface area in comparison to the oceans. Let's talk about second part, decomposition. You may have heard of the earthworm being referred to as farmer's friend. This is so because they help in the breakdown of complex organic matter as well as in the loosening of the soil. Similarly, decomposers break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, nutrients, and the process is called decomposition. Dead plant remains such as leaves, bark, flowers, and dead remains of the animals including fecal matter constitute the detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. The important steps in the process of decomposition are fragmentation, then leaching, then catabolism, then humidification, and the mineralization. So detritivores, example earthworm, break down detritus into smaller particles. This process is called fragmentation, breaking the detritus into the fragments, into smaller particles. By the process of leaching, water-soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil horizon and get precipitated as unavailable salts. So, in the process of leaching, the water-soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil horizon and get precipitated as unavailable salts. So, remember these are soluble inorganic nutrients, not the organic nutrients. Bacterial and the fungal enzymes degrade detritus into simpler inorganic substances. This process is called catabolism. It is important to note that the above steps in decomposition operate simultaneously on the detritus. Humidification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil. Humidification leads to accumulation of the dark colored amorphous substance called the humus that is highly resistant to the microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. Being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. The humus is further degraded by some microbes and release of inorganic nutrients occur by the process known as mineralization. So decomposition is largely an oxygen requiring process. The rate of decomposition is controlled by chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors. In a particular climatic condition, the decomposition rate is slower if the detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, and quicker if the detritus is rich in nitrogen and the water-soluble substances like sugars. Temperature and soil moisture are the important climatic factors that regulate decomposition through their effects on the activities of soil microbes. So warm and moist environment favor the decomposition, whereas the low temperature and anaerobiosis they inhibit the decomposition, resulting in build-up of organic material. Remember, decomposition is largely an oxygen-requiring process, so it is an aerobic process, not an anaerobic process. So here is the representation. A tree grows in the soil. A green leaf falls to the ground. Some are eaten by the insects and the other animals. Nutrients and energy enter the food web. So these nutrients and the energy enter in the food web because there is a primary consumer. So some nutrients leach into the soil by chemical action. This process is called leaching. So organic rich soil. So further decomposition by earthworms, bacteria, some mites, fungi, etc. So this process will be known as catabolism. Leaves partially consumed by decomposers such as fungi and bacteria, they begin to lose form and become later. It will be humidification and then the mineralization. So diagrammatic representation of decomposition cycle in a terrestrial ecosystem. Let's talk about third component of the ecosystem, that is the energy flow. Except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem, sun is only the source of energy for all ecosystems on earth. Of the incident solar radiation, less than 50% of it is photosynthetically active radiation, that is PAR. We know that plants and photosynthetic bacteria autotrophs fix sun's radiant energy to make food from simple inorganic materials. Plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR, and this small amount of energy sustains the entire living world. So it is very important to know how the solar energy captured by the plants flow through different organisms of an ecosystem. All organisms are dependent for their food on producers, either directly or indirectly. So you find the unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to the producers and then to the consumers. Is this in keeping with the first law of thermodynamics? Further, ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics. They need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorderliness, increasing entropy. So the green plant in the ecosystem are called producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Likewise, producers in an aquatic ecosystems are various species like phytoplankton, algae, and the higher plants. You have read about the food chains and the food webs that exist in nature. Starting from the plants or producers, food chains or rather food webs are formed, such as animal feeds on a plant or another animal, and in turn is food for the another. The chain or the web is formed because of their interdependency. No energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. The energy trapped by the producers hence is either passed on to the consumer or the organism dies. Death of an organism is the beginning of the detritus food chain or web. All organisms depend on plants directly or indirectly for their food needs. They are hence called consumers and also heterotrophs. So if they feed on the producers, the plant, they are called the primary consumers, and if the animal eats other animal which in turn eat the plants or they produce, they are called secondary consumers. Likewise, you could have tertiary consumers too. Obviously, the primary consumers will be herbivores. Some common herbivores are insects, birds, and mammals in terrestrial ecosystem, and the mollusk in the aquatic ecosystem. The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores, or more correctly, the primary carnivores. Though secondary consumers, those animals that depend on the primary carnivores for food are labeled as secondary carnivores, or these are called as tertiary consumers. A simple grazing food chain is depicted below. Grass is the producers, then goat, it is the primary consumer or the herbivore, and the man, the secondary consumer. The detritus food chain begins with the dead organic matter. It is made up of decomposers which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly fungi and the bacteria. They meet their energy and the nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter or the detritus. These are also called as saprotrophs. Sapro means to decompose. Decomposers secrete digestive enzymes that break down dead and the waste materials into simple inorganic materials which are subsequently absorbed by them. In an aquatic ecosystem, grazing food chain is the major conduit for the energy flow. As against this, in a terrestrial ecosystem, a much larger fraction of an energy flows through the detritus food chain than to the grazing food chain. Detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels. Some of the organisms of the detritus food chain are prey to the grazing food chain. So these are interconnected at some levels. And in the natural ecosystem, some animals like cockroaches, crows, etc. are omnivores. These natural connection of food chain make it foodborne. So organisms occupy a place in the natural surroundings or in the community according to their feeding relationship with the other organism. Based on the source of their nutrition or food, organisms occupy a specific place in the food chain that is known as the trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, herbivores the primary consumers to the second, and the carnivores secondary consumer to the third. Let's see the diagrammatic representation of trophic levels in an ecosystem. So there's the producer, first trophic level. These are the plants, photoautotrophs. Example will be phytoplankton, grass, trees, can be algae and higher plants. So primary consumers or the second trophic level, herbivores. These can be zooplankton, these can be grasshoppers, these can be cow or deer, anything. So moving to the secondary consumer. Secondary consumer is the third trophic level. These are the carnivores. These are the primary carnivores. So these can be birds, fishes, wolf. Moving ahead to the tertiary consumer. Tertiary consumer can be fourth trophic level. These are the top carnivores. These can be man, loin, etc. The important point to note is that the amount of energy decreases at successive trophic levels. When an organism dies, it is converted to the detritus or the dead biomass that serve as the energy source for decomposers. Organisms at each trophic level depend on those at the lower trophic level for their energy demands. Each trophic level has certain mass of living material at a particular time called the standing crop. The standing crop is measured as the mass of living organisms biomass or the number in a unit area. So the biomass of a species is expressed in terms of the fresh or the dry weight. Measurement of biomass in terms of dry weight is more accurate. Why? Because dry weight does not change with the moisture content. The number of trophic levels in the grazing food chain is restricted as the transfer of energy follows 10% law. Only 10% of the energy is transferred to each trophic level from the lower trophic level. This is known as the Blackman law. And in nature, it is possible to have many levels: producers, herbivores, primary carnivore, secondary carnivore in the grazing food chain. So let's see the energy flow through different trophic levels. This is the sun, the primary source of energy for all the food chains, except the deep hydrothermal vents. Sun serves as the energy source for every organism. So this is the first trophic level, produces plants. So some amount of heat is released and the rest energy is moved to the second trophic level, the primary consumers which feed upon the plants, that is the herbivores. Now here some amount of energy is released as heat and 10% of the energy is moved on to the third trophic level, secondary consumers, the carnivores. These are the birds. So the some amount of heat is again released, and 10% of the energy is moved on to the fourth trophic level, the tertiary consumer or the top carnivore. This is the eagle or the vulture. So here the food chain can be like earthworm, the herbivore, can be eaten by snail. So here also the 10% energy only flows. So now this will become the secondary consumer or the third trophic level. Now after this can be at the third trophic level. This can also be at the fourth trophic level by eating the tertiary, by eating the secondary consumer. This can be at the fourth trophic level also. So moving ahead, ecological pyramids. You must be familiar with the shape of the pyramid. The base of the pyramid is broad and it gets narrows towards the apex. One gets a similar shape whether you express the food or the energy relationship between the organisms at different trophic levels. Thus, this relationship is expressed in terms of number, biomass, or the energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producers or the first trophic level, while the apex represents the tertiary or the top level consumer. The three types of ecological pyramids that are usually studied are pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. So, pyramid of numbers in a grassland ecosystem, only 3 top carnivores are supported in an ecosystem based on the production of nearly 6 million plants. So, here are nearly 6 million plants. So, our base is very broad. Then, primary consumer, these are lesser than the producers. Then, secondary consumers, and the tertiary consumer. So this is the pyramidal shape of the pyramid of numbers in a grassland ecosystem. Let's talk about the pyramid of biomass. Shows a sharp decrease in biomass at higher trophic levels. As you can see the values, the biomass is decreasing at higher trophic levels. Inverted pyramid of biomass is there is inverted pyramid of biomass in the pond ecosystems. So here what happens is, small standing crop of phytoplankton supports large standing crop of zooplankton. Here is a small standing crop, a small biomass of the phytoplankton supports a larger biomass of primary consumers or the second trophic level, or known as the zooplanktons. An ideal pyramid of energy observes the primary producers convert only 1% of the energy in the sunlight available to them into NPP. So primary producers convert only 1% of the energy of the sunlight into NPP. So here the energy of sunlight is 10 lakh joules. So only 1% of it is converted into the NPP and transferred to the producers, used with the producers. So 10,000 joules was only used. Now using the Blackman's law, only 10% is passed on to the next trophic level. So only 1000 joules is passed. So similarly the next 10%, the only 100 joule is passed. Next 10%, 10 joules is passed at the tertiary consumer level. So energy keeps on decreasing on the subsequent trophic levels. Any calculations of energy contained biomass or numbers has to include all organisms at the trophic level. No generalizations we make will be true if we take only the few individuals at any trophic level into account. So no generalization we make will be true if we take only few individuals at any trophic level into account. So for the calculation we have to include all the organisms at that trophic level. One must remember that the trophic level represents a functional level, not a species as such. A given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. For example, a sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats the seeds, fruits, peas, and a secondary consumer when it eats the insects and the worms. Can you work out how many trophic levels human beings function at in the food chain? They can be the primary consumer, they can be the secondary consumer, they can be tertiary consumers. In most ecosystems, all the pyramids of numbers of energy and biomass are applied. Reducers are more in number and biomass than the herbivores, and herbivores are more in number and biomass than the carnivores. Also, energy at the lower trophic level is always more than the higher trophic level. So there are exceptions to this generalization. If you were to count the number of insects feeding on the big tree, what kind of pyramid would you get? So if there are number of insects feeding on a large number of insects feeding on a big tree, so pyramid of number will be inverted. It will not be upright. So now add an estimate of the number of small birds depending on the insects, as also the large number of larger birds eating the smaller. Draw the shape you would get. The pyramid of biomass in sea is generally inverted because the biomass of the fishes far exceeds that of the phytoplankton. So pyramid of energy is always upright, can never be inverted, because when the energy flows from a particular trophic level to the next trophic level, some energy is always lost in each step. Each bar in the energy pyramid indicates the amount of the energy present at the trophic level in the given time or annually per unit area. However, there are certain limitations of the ecological pyramid, such as it does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more trophic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. Moreover, saprophytes are not given any place in the ecological pyramids, even though they play a vital role in the ecosystem. Let's talk about summary. An ecosystem is a structural and functional unit of nature, and it comprises abiotic and abiotic components. Abiotic components are the inorganic materials, air, water and soil, whereas biotic components are the producers, consumers and the decomposers. Each ecosystem has characteristic physical structure resulting from the interactions among the biotic and the abiotic components. Species composition and stratification are the two main structural features of an ecosystem. Species composition and stratification are the two main structural features of an ecosystem. Based on source of nutrition, every organism occupies a place in an ecosystem. Productivity, decomposition, energy flow and nutrient cycling are the four important components of an ecosystem. Primary productivity is the rate of capture of solar energy or biomass production of the producers. It is divided into two types: gross primary productivity (GPP) and the net primary productivity (NPP). Rate of capture of solar energy or total production of the organic matter is called the GPP. NPP is the remaining biomass as the energy left after utilization of producers. So after subtracting the respiratory losses, it is called as NPP, net primary productivity. Secondary productivity is the rate of assimilation of the food energy by the consumers. In decomposition, complex organic compounds of detritus are converted into the carbon dioxide, water and inorganic nutrients by the decomposers. Decomposition involves three processes, namely fragmentation of the detritus, leaching and the catabolism. Energy flow is unidirectional. First, plants capture solar energy and then food is transferred from the producers to the decomposers. Organisms on different trophic levels in nature are connected to each other for food or energy relationship, forming a food chain. The storage and movement of nutrient elements to the various components of the ecosystem is called nutrient cycling. Nutrients are repeatedly used through this process. Nutrient cycling is of two types: gaseous and the rudimentary and the sedimentary. Atmosphere or the hydrosphere is the reservoir for the gaseous cycle type of cycle, the carbon, whereas Earth's crust is a reservoir for the sedimentary type of the cycle, that is phosphorus cycle. Products of ecosystem processes are named as ecosystem services, example purification of air and water by the forest. This was all about the chapter ecosystem. This was the second chapter of our ecology unit. So I hope you all understand the chapter. Thank you for listening me out. Have a great day. Stay tuned for updates.